There are moments in history when silence speaks louder than gunfire, when the smallest voice a steady, unshaken tears through the arrogance of command. This is one such story. The year was 1947, on a remote military outpost carved into the dust and heat of a forgotten border. The men stationed there lived under one name, a Captain Alden Varick, decorated in past wars, feared in the present. Varick's authority was law. His boots struck the ground like thunder, and no one dared look him in the eye. He demanded obedience, not respect, and confusion was his punishment for thought. Among the fresh recruits stood Private Elias Marek, 20 years old, calm-eyed, with hands that trembled not from fear, but from discipline. He spoke little, worked hard, and listened. Always listened. The other men called him the Quiet One, unaware that within him burned a sharp, moral clarity stronger than most generals possess. On the morning of inspection, the camp lined up in formation beneath the rising sun. The captain walked the line, his temper already coiled. He found fault in everything: a boot unshined, a rifle slightly off angle, until his gaze settled on Elias. The recruit stood firm, uniform spotless, rifle precise. Yet the captain paused, narrowing his eyes. "Take that wounded mule and drag it out beyond the ridge," he ordered coldly. "Leave it there to die." Orders are orders. Elias's eyes lifted, calm but steady. And history, in that moment, began to shift. The air thickened. Every man froze, waiting for Elias's answer. The mule, a wounded supply animal from the last patrol, lay barely breathing near the stables. The order was cruel, unnecessary, and everyone knew it. Elias's voice, when it came, was quiet, almost too quiet. "Permission to refuse, sir." The camp seemed to stop breathing. Varick's face darkened, veins drew across his temples. "You refuse a direct order?" he barked. Elias's jaw tightened. "An unworthy order deserves no obedience." Then a silence. The captain stepped forward, chest to chest. A hand shot out, shoving Elias back, but the recruit didn't flinch. In a motion clean and practiced, he straightened his posture, looked the captain in the eye, and saluted, not with fear, but finality. And in that salute, something broke. Not Elias, not the rules, but the illusion of Varick's invincibility. The entire camp fell utterly still. What followed was not shouting, not punishment. It was silence, a deep, suffocating silence. Captain Varick stood frozen, the blood draining from his face as the other officers looked on. He had expected resistance, not dignity, anger, not calm. And in that composure, he saw something he could not command, a respect freely given only to the worthy. The men dared not move, though every heartbeat echoed like a drum. Elias remained at attention, hand to brow, unwavering. The captain's authority, so absolute moments ago, now looked fragile, like a flag in wind. A senior officer, Colonel Reeves, stepped forward. He had been watching from the balcony above. "Captain," he said evenly, "if your men fear you more than they trust you, you are already defeated." Varick's lips trembled, but no words came. The colonel turned to Elias. "You understand what defiance costs, Private?" "Yes, sir," Elias replied. "But obedience without conscience costs more." The colonel's stern eyes softened. "Then you have chosen rightly." He nodded toward the wounded mule. "See that it's treated, soldier." Elias saluted once more and walked toward the stables. The men, one by one, broke formation, but not disorderly. They followed, silent, each gaze heavy with something new, reverence. That night, the captain's tent remained dark. No orders came, no footsteps echoed. The camp was hushed, as though it feared to disturb the weight of what had happened. In the morning, the captain requested transfer. He left without a word. The recruits spoke of that day for years as the day authority bowed to integrity. Moral, true discipline is not blind obedience. It is knowing when to stand, even if you stand alone. Years passed. The border outpost fell silent beneath new banners, new wars, new generations. But the story of Private Elias Marek lived on, whispered through the ranks, told around campfires by men who had never met him. They called it the salute of silence. It became a quiet code among soldiers, that moment when a man's conscience outweighs his fear. Officers studied it at the academy as an example of moral discipline. Recruits repeated it in the barracks as a test of courage. Captain Varick was never seen again in command. Yet, Long after his pride had vanished into the footnotes of history, Marek's calm defiance remained immortal, a single act of stillness that shook an empire's idea of obedience. When Marek was asked years later, by a journalist, if he regretted his decision, he smiled faintly and said, "A soldier's first duty is to truth. Orders end, but conscience doesn't." And that line, engraved on the Academy's marble hall decades later, stood beneath his portrait, a man saluting, eyes forward, unbroken by power. Because in every age, the world remembers not the loud, but the just. And sometimes, the loudest courage is silence itself.